this is a massive operation because it's impossible right now to reach people by road.
Aid agencies struggle to feed thousands fleeing tribal violence in South Sudan. And a shooting in the world's largest refugee camp leaves a community leader dead.
We tried to get him as much medical attention as possible and to evacuate him to Nairobi, but unfortunately on the way he died.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
Hello and thanks once again for your company. Papua New Guinea, like most Asia-Pacific islands, is a very traditional society. Women suffer from low status, poverty, and many are illiterate. But women's groups there are working hard to promote their rights and interests in the country. George Colonnet has been on the road for the World Bank and observed how Papuan women are making their mark.
We're off to Hidden Valley in the Morobe province of Papua New Guinea, some 300 kilometers from Port Moresby. In a vast clearing carved in the huge tropical forest, there is a surreal ballet of massive trucks rumbling around the vast open-pit gold-silver mine, loading yellow dirt from huge excavators. And guess what? Several of these 100-ton trucks, their tires alone dwarf an average person, are driven by women. Apparently, the mine owners love women drivers because they handle these monsters with a softer touch than their male counterparts. These women are very good workers and they love their job, but somehow they still have to prove themselves. Thelma Elizabeth, coordinator for the Morobe mining exploration.
We're still facing problems where they reckon the man should go to work rather than the female. But we're doing awareness and we're telling them that no, everybody has an equal right to employment, just as everybody has equal right to speech, movement.
At the gold and diamond mine, these female truck drivers are learning their trade in simulators comparable to those used to train pilots of modern jets. But in the hinterland, things are different. Classes are crowded, no pen, no paper. Students have to remember everything, and yet
they will want me to stand with no breaks. They just want to continue.
The school teacher is beaming.
So they are very interested in learning. Reading and writing is not a problem. So when we tested them, they just did everything right.
And they have organized themselves in women's groups to promote their interests and be able to become full citizens of their country. Ah, the Solomon Islands. These islands are beautiful and romantic. In some of these remote islands, people have to take a boat to go to a hospital, but gasoline for the boat is very expensive and people are very poor. If you suddenly become ill, well, Miranda Pereseni lost her daughter. She remembers that fateful day.
There was no boat to take her to the big clinic. We just stayed here while she was having labor pains. When we finally got her to the clinic, she delivered the baby. But she lost a lot of blood and she died.
The local infirmary is run down. Women have wanted the man to revamp this community hospital for a long time. And Wilson Gina is
I'm not happy at all. In fact, I'm very disappointed. They have enough time to complete this project and the men were pointing fingers at one another and they did not do anything. Tonight, I'm having a community meeting and I'm going to express myself very strongly.
Finally, the women prevailed. The man agreed to finish rebuilding the health center.
George Colonnet there, reporting on the rising influence of women in Papua New Guinea. This week it's been hard to ignore the recent fighting in South Sudan's Jonglei state, forcing more than 20,000 people into hiding. The UN reports they have located as many as 10,000 people or more in Pibor, the town next to where the attacks took place. The majority are hiding in the bush with no food, clothes or basic necessities, many having fled with just the clothes on their back. Lisa Grande, the Deputy UN Envoy to South Sudan, is also the UN's humanitarian coordinator in the country. She's speaking with Jocelyn Sambira.
Right now, there is a serious problem developing and unrolling here in South Sudan in the state of Jonglei. The United Nations mission in South Sudan and the humanitarian agencies that are working here are trying to locate where the populations are, particularly those who are in the bush. For those who made it into safety in Pibor, tomorrow, the World Food Program is going to start emergency food deliveries into this town now. This is a massive operation because it's impossible right now to reach Pibor by road. So the operation that the World Food Program is mounting is going to have to be done by air. This is very costly, but we don't have any choice.
Are there any official casualties?
Well, that's very hard for us to know. We've had assessment teams that have been in Pibor for the past 2 days, but because we don't have teams that are in the bush, we don't really know. What I can tell you is that as a result of the fighting in Lakwangole, there were 63 wounded, which the government of South Sudan and the UN mission have today evacuated with support from some of the humanitarian agencies. This has been a very large airlift because Lakwangole, like the town of Pibor that I was mentioning, also cannot be reached by road. So all of those wounded have had to be taken out by helicopter with one sortie after another. It's taken most of the afternoon.
This is not the first time that there are reports of insecurity in that part of South Sudan. As early as August this year, you alerted the world to some renewed ethnic clashes that were going on in Jonglei State. So how long has this been going on?
Before this latest incident, for the year as a whole, there were already 90,000 people, close to 100,000 people who had been uprooted by violence just since January 2011, when, of course, there was the historic referendum that decided the status of South Sudan. What we have seen in the past few days is a repeat of a pattern that has affected this state for a number of years. One community attacks another, and then there's a retaliatory attack and so forth.
And what can the UN do if the situation becomes worse?
What the United Nations mission in South Sudan is doing, and there's a very strong Chapter 7 mandate that's been given to this mission by the Security Council. They are directly intervening, trying to deter the violence and to protect civilians. And it's been because of that mandate that UNMISS has deployed a battalion-sized combat force into the areas where violence is expected. And we hope that by doing this, not only will violence be deterred, but we can also help to break the spiral of retaliatory attacks that unfortunately have impacted Jonglei for a number of years.
Adding further pressure to the situation, a lack of trust between Sudan and the recently independent South Sudan could provide a potential flashpoint for trouble this year, and that's according to the head of peacekeeping at the United Nations. Hervé Lassou says that the UN will be keeping a close eye on developments there and in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And despite that concern, the number of peacekeepers around the world, currently numbering around 120,000, is expected to decline over the next 12 months. Daniel Dickinson asked Mr. Lassou about the outlook for 2012.
I would expect, on the contrary, that year 2012, barring, of course, unforeseen circumstances, should not see any major expansion of the peacekeepers. As you know, there are around 121,000 right now, and what we're looking at is rather slight reduction in numbers. First, because missions like the one in Timor-Leste, we are looking again, and unless things deteriorate, we are looking towards downsizing and possibly a closing of the mission by the end of the next year. And similarly, we anticipate some reductions according to, the context allowing, for instance, in Haiti, for instance, in Liberia.
You mention unforeseen circumstances. How do you plan for that?
The unforeseen is indeed unforeseen by definition. You never know what the specifics are going to be, but you have to be ready to handle a specific situation. And this is what we are working on. urgent reaction mechanism, and being able to face something entirely new. What this department did, for instance, almost 2 years ago, in the immediate aftermath of the earthquake in Haiti, and when I say immediate, I say in the next 12 hours, measures were taken and implemented to send very experienced people there and take whatever measures were needed in the circumstances.
How complicated is it to set something like that up, to react so quickly?
You need the administrative mechanisms, you need the suppleness, from the organizational point of view, and then you need, of course, the availability and the dedication of the personnel.
How difficult is this job? How difficult is it to head up this department?
It's a matter of staying abreast of all that happens, and there is plenty happening.
Which potential flashpoints are you looking at during 2012? Where can you expect there to be problems?
Well, based on what we see today, I think we need to follow very, very closely the situation in the Sudans, because the relationship between Khartoum and Juba definitely is not a good one. There is lack of trust, of confidence, many unresolved issues, and always the risks that there may be some deflagration. As of today, again, the situation in the Congo, in Democratic Congo, needs to be watched very closely, as does the situation in the Middle East, which can impact on the three peacekeeping missions we have there. And then there is, of course, the totally unexpected, which might happen against elsewhere. So the only thing is be ready.
And you've been in this post for around 3 months. What are your impressions?
They are the realities, of politics, the decision-making by the Security Council. They give us our tasks. So it's a diplomatic process. And then there's also all the issues of management, which are very important and which you have to tackle on a daily basis.
So this isn't a job that you regret taking?
Absolutely not, no. I mean, I celebrated a couple of weeks ago my 40 years of professional life, all of that in the French Foreign Ministry until 2 months ago. I do not regret anything at all from those 40 years, nor do I regret anything from my 2.5 months here.
Okay, let's hear a somewhat more inspiring story from the UN now with Citizen Ambassador Jonathan Dufont of the Philippines, who hopes to change lives one bottle at a time. At least that's what he hopes to do with his promotion of the use of plastic bottles to build houses. He's one of 3 people to be recognised by the UN for ideas that make the world a better or safer place. He discussed his ideas with Jerry Adams.
The concept that I presented was about creating communities made out of plastic bottles. It's a new project that is ongoing in Guatemala as in the Philippines. Instead of using hollow blocks as the main material in construction, they are using eco bricks. They fill up 1-liter bottles of soda with cement and liquid adobe, and they stack it up on top of the other, and they make it a wall, which is 4 times more stronger than hollow blocks.
No kidding.
Yes.
What about the environmental implications? Is it very hot or very cold, or
no,
is there some seepage or something?
Yeah, there is a ventilation, so they put between those bottles a PVC pipe so that air would flow into it. They also use glass bottles as well to make passive lighting. In my country, they have this project called 1 liter of light. They're using these solar bulbs. You just put chlorine into it and distilled water, and the light from the sun refracts it and makes it a 50-watt bulb.
Wow.
So it's really possible that I presented that idea so that I told the Secretary General that we should have a model community in every United Nations member to serve as a model, because it's really feasible. I mean, people are doing it now, but they're not getting the support they need, and people are not supportive of alternative ways of creating structures such as this.
This is your idea, or you are promoting it?
Yeah, I am promoting this idea. So the original concept there is to make every nation have a model community for it.
Where did the idea come from?
Actually, the design itself, started from the U.S. So I'm quite surprised that the Asian countries and Central America are the ones who adopted it.
What conditions in your country and in the world are you concerned about and that you want to change?
For now, I would like to focus more on the youth, especially in educating them. Because more and more, especially in my country, it's always typhoon every year. So every year we lack like 7,000 classrooms. So there is really a need to create this new alternative constructions. And the material that is used is very abundant. I mean, not all people, even though there are aggressive campaigns in recycling, I mean, not many people pay attention to it. They still don't get the long-term effects of global warming, climate change, and stuff like that.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
Police in Kenya have launched an investigation into the killing of a refugee leader at the Dadaab camp for Somali refugees in the northeast of the country. The man, who was shot several times, was the chairperson of a community peace and security team, which is instrumental in maintaining security in the camp. Dadaab is the world's largest refugee camp and is the home to more than 460,000 people. The killing is just one of the latest in a series of incidents at the camp, and Nairobi-based Vivian Tan works with the international agency responsible for the camp.
On Thursday, we received news that a refugee leader had been shot in Hagadera camp of the Dadaab complex of camps in Kenya. We tried to get him as much medical attention as possible and to evacuate him to Nairobi. But unfortunately, on the way to Nairobi, he died.
Vivian, can you tell us anything about this person?
This is a person who headed the community policing team in Dadaab, and he was helping us as a liaison with the refugee community and humanitarian community and local police to ensure security and to sensitize refugees on security issues in the camp.
Do you have any information about whether he was specifically targeted? Was this a murder?
This we don't know for sure. We're still investigating this.
Okay, how about the person who carried out the attack? Any info there?
Not at this point.
So what role are the Kenyan police playing in all this?
I believe they're doing the investigation.
Is there any reason why the chairperson of the camp's peace and security team would be targeted?
Again, we're not very sure about the motives, and we are investigating and working with the Kenyan police to find out more.
And what now does this mean in general for security in the camps?
Well, this is definitely a very worrying sign. Recently, we've had several security incidents in Dadaab, and this is the latest one. It's causing grave concern to us, and we're concerned that it may affect the refugee community as well as how aid agencies like UNHCR deliver aid to the refugees. This is definitely a very difficult climate for the refugees and for aid agencies like us. And we're working closely with the refugee community and the Kenyan police to try to deliver as much assistance as we can in these very limited conditions.
I mentioned that Dadaab is the world's largest refugee camp, and it's something like the third largest city in Kenya. Is there enough security there? Is a pseudo-police force required?
Well, Dadaab is a sprawling camp, and the population has grown dramatically in the last year. We are working really closely with the Kenyan authorities to try to make sure that there is adequate security. But given recent developments, I think it's a sign that we need to do more collectively.
That's Vivian Tan in Nairobi discussing difficulties in the refugee camp for Somalis in Kenya.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
To health matters now, and a recent survey has shown a decline in the use of cigarettes and alcohol by teenagers in Western nations. But levels of marijuana and prescription drug abuse are on the increase. Joe Belenfi has more.
An annual survey of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders is showing good signs.
The most positive news has to do with the very low rates of smoking that we're seeing among teenagers when compared with the prior years.
Dr. Nora Volkal is an institute director at the NIH. She says that cigarette use among teens is at its lowest since the survey started in 1975.
This really illustrates how prevention campaigns can have a big impact in terms of one of the behaviors that constitutes a serious public health problem.
Dr. Volkal adds that reducing smoking among teens is important because research shows that smoking in adolescence significantly increases risk of becoming addicted to nicotine, but also because exposure to nicotine may prime the brain to be more sensitive to the rewarding effects of other drugs.
So by decreasing the number of kids exposed to nicotine, where it's a win-win, because on the one hand, we're going to prevent the adverse medical effects, but on the other one, we may be doing a prevention against substance abuse later on in life. Daily drinking has decreased by 50% from 1996, and it has decreased by, binge drinking has decreased by 30% also for that time period. Again, extremely important because drinking accounts for one of the main causes of morbidity and mortality among teenagers because of the association of accidents and mortality while driving under the effects of alcohol.
Despite the alcohol and cigarette declines noted in the survey, use of marijuana has shown some increases in recent years and remains steady. For example, Dr. Volkov points out that 6.6% of 12th graders report smoking marijuana daily. That's actually 1 in 15 high school seniors.
And knowing that marijuana intoxication interferes with the ability to learn and memorize, one can clearly predict that these very high rates of daily consumption are going to be associated with an impaired educational performance.
Another major concern from the survey is about the use of synthetic marijuana, known as K2 or spice. Already 11.4% of 12th graders reported past year use.
I was certainly very surprised because this is a new drug. We first heard about it in 2008, 2009. So to get so rapidly such high rates of utilization among 12th graders, when there's really very little information with respect to its toxic effects, is worrisome. And what it does tell me is it highlights an urgency to create educational campaigns that alert teenagers, their parents, and the public at large about what these drugs are really about.
Dr. Volkov warns that synthetic marijuana or spice can be addictive and dangerous. Severe medical consequences such as heart attack, irregular heartbeat, and psychosis have been associated with its use. She adds that parents should not be complacent when it comes to teen use of alcohol and drugs.
The sense, no, this is not going to happen to my kid. It's going to happen to someone else, but not mine, is an incorrect way to start. All of the adolescents are at great risk of experimenting with drugs. And even if parents have had a close dialogue with them, the kids are good students, while those are protective effects, they do not necessarily guarantee that they will completely protect an adolescent.
In addition to maintaining a dialogue with their children, Dr. Volkov also recommends parents be alert to personality or behavior changes in their teenagers.
And also, parents many times dismiss the use of alcohol and they say, well, after all, it's a legal drug. Or even sometimes for cigarettes, after all, it's a legal drug. Well, they have to be cautious because what we're now understanding, first of all, is that the effects of drugs, whether it's legal or illegal, on an adolescent brain are different from those of an adult brain because the brain of the adolescents is much more plastic. It has not been fully developed and therefore may be more sensitive to some of the effects of drugs of abuse, including those of illicit substances.
This goes for prescription medications as well, says Dr. Volkov. The survey also showed mixed news regarding the non-medical use of prescription drugs like the opioid painkillers Vicodin and OxyContin, as well as non-medical use of the ADHD medicines Adderall and Ritalin. This is Joe Belinfi in Bethesda, Maryland.
After a year of economic reforms, Cuba marks the 53rd anniversary of its communist revolution this year, with the latest reforms seeing carpenters, locksmiths and photographers able to operate independently of the state, but many Cubans feel this remains insufficient. President Raul Castro's decision not to ease its tight curbs on migration and other laws on the island have left many Cubans disappointed. Al Jazeera's Tom Ackerman reports.
As 2011 came to a close, Cubans with recent family ties to Spain lined up at its embassy in Havana to meet a global deadline to apply for Spanish citizenship.
Everyone is trying to take advantage of this in order to travel and be able to visit our families, a father, a son, a brother. These are difficult situations. Family separation is very difficult.
But most other Cubans who want to leave find it hard to do so. Despite widespread expectations, The government of President Raul Castro has chosen not to ease its tight curbs on migration. It's a disappointment for Cubans who had hoped for a faster pace in loosening the tight controls that have kept Cuba in limbo.
5 years, Raul Castro has been in power, and if you look at where we are now and 5 years ago, it's not much of a change economically, politically.
While Cuba can take pride in its education, health, and human service advances, the command and control economy badly trails those of Mexico, Brazil, and other Caribbean states. Industrial production is barely half what it was 20 years ago. Farming is down to a fraction of historical output, and only 10% of the workforce is actively employed. Conceding its failures, the government has been breaching bans on private enterprise, expanding the list of small businesses.
The government didn't help us with this at all. We created this on our own. Blood, sweat, and tears, as they say.
And after half a century, allowing individuals to freely buy and sell homes again. But such initiatives have been too meager to absorb the 20% of the workforce which the government had planned to sack from the public payroll this year. The government continues to blame the U.S. for punishing Cuba through its 50-year-old trade embargo, a complaint that President Barack Obama rejects.
So far, at least, what we haven't seen is the kind of genuine spirit of transformation inside of Cuba that would justify us eliminating the embargo.
The Castro government continues to clamp down on freedom of expression, association, and assembly, and human rights groups say critics of the one-party government continue to be harassed. Without movement on that front, Cuba's prospects are tough for bettering its overall lot in 2012. Tom Ackerman, Al Jazeera.
You may not have heard of it, but Chagas disease kills an estimated 10,000 people each year. The illness, spread by insects, was once entirely confined to Latin America, but has now also reached parts of North America and Europe. According to the World Health Organization, some 10 million people are currently infected worldwide. Most live in poor, rural areas. In Argentina alone, some 3 million people are thought to be suffering from the disease, many in the country's indigenous communities. NTN 24's Brian Andrews has more on this story.
Franco belongs to one of Argentina's few remaining indigenous groups, the Toba, and after years of sleeping on the floor of her home in what's known as the impenetrable forest, she got Chagas disease, an illness spread by insects often found living in the walls of traditional clay huts.
My heart feels heavy. My stomach's bloated. My head aches and I can't sleep.
It can take up to 10 years before people suffering from Chagas start to show symptoms such as heart, digestion, and neurological problems, by which time it's often too late to save them. Access to medical care is near on impossible for many of the Toba who can't afford to make the trip to Buenos Aires for treatment. Isolated deep in the forest, they often simply take painkillers.
For almost a year, all I've been able to do is stay in bed.
In Argentina, 3 million people are thought to be infected with Chagas. The majority live in the country's most remote and impoverished regions. Twice a year, a group of volunteer doctors travel to the impenetrable forest to treat the Toba and raise awareness through prevention campaigns. Working with kids is their top priority.
If a patient is treated in time and in the correct way, then there's a chance of survival because their antibodies are reinforced. It's possible if the person is treated before the age of 10 or 12. After that, it's too late because the illness is too developed.
And there's only so much doctors can do. They're calling on the Argentine government to help fund the construction of better homes to protect some of their most vulnerable communities.
NTN 24's Brian Andrews reporting on how Chagas disease is affecting the indigenous population of Argentina. And that is the world for this week. If you want to learn more about the program or wish to make a contribution, then please visit us at www.theworldradioshow.com. There you'll also find a link to our Facebook page, where you can join the discussions and make comments on any of the items featured in the program. The program is produced and compiled by Tim Stackpool, and I look forward to your company next time. Until then, bye for now.